Welcome everybody to the closing session of IMS 2021. Our theme this year was building racial equity in and across motherhood. And we were just talking a little bit before the recording started about how we can carry forward the work that we've been doing the past several days beyond this conference in our local communities, in our families, in our classrooms, and all of those things. But with us today, we have Dr. Aisha Nyandoro, who I consider one of the premier experts at bridging how to take academic work, put it into the community, and apply it personally in beautiful ways. And I think you will be as engaged with her as I am and always am when I am speaking with her. I'm going to quickly pull up my, sorry for not being prepared here. In fact, let's see here, 1 second, apologies for this. I have to, okay, sorry about that.
You are fine, no apologies needed.
I tell you, it always starts going a little off the rails on the last talk.
We're not sitting on patios having wine. We're good.
Wine's really next. If you like,
I know. I saw that on the agenda. That's next.
Bring your own beverage ceremony to celebrate crossing the finish line, but we're not there yet. So for the time being, I'm going to officially share my screen correctly this time. And as we already talked about, we will be talking with Dr. Aisha Nyandoro for a few minutes. We'd love to open that up to the folks that have joined us today for a Q&A. We will be going over the action steps proposed by the panels and go over some upcoming conference information. I'd love to have feedback from the folks that are here to talk about what worked, what didn't work. We're always looking to improve, and the best way to do that is to get ideas from you about how we can do better. There's a couple other housekeeping things we're going to go over. And then after that, we are going to move on to a social hour, which is always delightful, of course. But with no further ado, Dr. Aisha Nyandoro is with us. She is the CEO of Springboard to Opportunities, which supports residents of affordable housing, and is an innovator of the organization's Magnolia Mothers Trust, which gives $1,000 per month to families led by African-American women in Jackson, Mississippi. Her PhD is in community psychology from Michigan State University, and with more than a decade of experience developing, implementing, and evaluating programs aimed at improving the quality of life for individuals with limited resources. She calls on that experience by her multiple honors, including recognition as a fellow of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation Community Leadership Network and Ascend at the Aspen Institute. Her work and words have been featured in the New York Times, Essence, CNN, MSNBC, and Fast Company, and I could not be more delighted than to have you share this space with us today. And I'm going to hand this over to you so that you can share all of your joy, wisdom, and passion with us. And I look forward to doing the Q&A afterwards.
Thank you so much, Katie. And thank you all so much for having me. So this is going to be real easy, y'all. It's Sunday, and we have so much to wrap up, and I want to leave as much space as possible for questions, and I want to leave space for you all to get to your closing ceremony. And when I was talking to Katie about the planning, I was like, what do you want me to share in the keynote? And she gave a list of stuff, and I was like, oh, I can basically talk about whatever I want to. Those are my favorite kind of keynotes. So thank you so much for the space to talk about whatever I want to, because y'all love a good soapbox. So I am going to try to stay off the soapbox, but I can't make any promises. I actually have words and remarks written down. I may get to them. And then also, you heard me say earlier, if you were here, I have a 3-year-old who without fail will make a guest appearance. And so when Tanai comes in, we have a thing, which is so horrible that he knows this. He'll come, he'll speak. And then it's like, okay, if you give me your phone, I'll go away. And so I'll probably give him my phone and he'll go away. So we'll just, we'll see how well my husband does in wrangling him. But if not, he'll come and we'll see how that goes. So like I said, thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I really welcome the opportunity and engage with individuals across various platforms. And I really do take it as an honor to spend time with people committed to helping moms get the support they need, which is something that is near and dear to my heart, not just as it relates to my profession and my motherhood, but just related to what the world needs right now. So as was read in my bio, I run an organization called Springboard to Opportunities. People often ask me about the radically resident-driven tagline of the organization that I have helped start and that I've led since 2013. But I think a lot of times when people are asking me, why do we call ourselves radically resident-driven? What they are really asking me is why I put so much energy in engaging community members. In fact, when we started the organization, I remember a well-intentioned colleague informing me that residents do not know what it is that they need. And in fact, it was our responsibility to tell them what was best for them. The colleague went on to quote this ridiculous Henry Ford quote to me, where she says, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster cars. I thought then it was asinine quote. I still think it's asinine. And being a granddaughter and student of the civil rights movement, I found the ideal of design without inclusion insulting. But not only is it insulting, it's wrong. In contrast to the Ford quote, people being grounded in community being grounded in a community has allowed me to operate in the space of possibility. It is possible to take care of our community. It is possible to eliminate poverty. It is possible to provide access and opportunity for all. It is possible to listen to those who are closest to the pain for the solutions needed to affect change. Springboard to Opportunities was formed by resident input during the planning process many years ago. I sat on couches and porches and not a conference room. I listened to families, I listened to kids, I listened to moms, grandkids, all of the individuals who were making their lives living in these communities, and ask them one simple thing. What is it that you need for you and your family to have a life outside of this community? I realized in doing this that it was imperative for Springboard to provide that space, because so many times when families live in poverty, that is what is lacking. Ensuring the voices of community is at the heart of everything we do, from our programs to our motto, which is radically resident driven. I went to graduate school many years ago at Michigan State so that I could learn to do exactly what it is that I do each day, which is weave my passion for community with the skills and tools necessary to have an impact. I consider myself fortunate that, given who my family is and because of their love for academia and community, I always knew what I wanted to be when I grow up. I went to graduate school knowing that I wanted to run a nonprofit. And in fact, I was so adamant about this that, imagine my surprise, my first year of graduate school, while sitting in my practicum course, a well-intended, y'all, I'm gonna say well-intended with air quotes, I think she was well-intended, a well-intended professor informed me that I was wasting my time, that I did not need a graduate degree to run a nonprofit organization. I had choice words for her. I won't share those now because I'll be digressing, but I prevailed, and I went on to finish school. And several years and hundreds of hours of conversations later, I'm still listening to families, still using that degree that I did not need to go about affecting change, weaving my passion for a community with academia. In my listening, this is why I was so surprised one day with a mom that I've worked with for years, Valeria, a quick-witted mother with an easy smile, informed me that she did not have $5 for a Little Caesars pizza. This was a parking lot exchange. It was just a random talking. I asked her, what are you doing for the weekend? And she simply said, nothing. I don't even have money for pizza for my kids. Our exchange took less than 5 minutes, but it sent me reeling. We were friends. I had been listening. I thought I knew her and her family's needs. And it helped me understand that even though sometimes when you are well-intended and listening, you can still miss the critical details. With all the wraparound programs and services that Springboard was offering, we had still missed critical details for the families that we were serving. Part of innovating and weaving and listening and research in academia is that you know when you need to evolve. And that's exactly what I realized that day, that as an organization, we had to evolve because we were not leaning in and living our motto of being radically resident driven. Because of this exchange, I started asking more pointed questions of those we served. And I quickly realized that Valeria's situation was the rule, not the exception. There were a multitude of moms living in our community communities that did not have the financial resources necessary to have pizza, to pay for extracurricular activities, to go the extra mile for their kids. And listening to them, we realized that the solution was not another program, it was not another strategy, it was cash. I began researching because y'all, I'm a researcher. That degree I didn't need. I started researching how do you go about distributing cash to families, and this is where I learned about the world of universal basic income, or what we would eventually implement, which is guaranteed income, cash without restrictions. So when I initially proposed giving cash to women that we work with, I was met with a lot of skepticism and raised eyebrows. There was no research or blueprint about how to do this for a population as low income as ours at the time. This was in 2017. The ideal of giving cash, especially to Black women living in poverty, was unheard of. Individuals said everything to me from, how do you know they won't waste it? How are you going to make sure that you are actually controlling how they use the resources? What if they give it to their boyfriends? None of what I heard was based in research. None of it was based in possibilities. It was all based in isms. The assumption was that poverty was a personal and moral failing of an individual, not the symptom of a larger, broken, punitive system that perpetuates cycles of generational poverty, rather than helping people break out of it. As a result of this assumption, raising cash to give away was hard. And time again, we were met with continued skepticism. And the reality is, whether we like to admit it or not, we all fall into this deservedness trap from time to time. It's easier to see negative characteristics of poverty, making it an individual failing based on deficits, where someone could work harder or budget better or spend thriftier to work their way out of poverty. That is a story we are much more comfortable hearing, but it's simply not the truth. The reality is that practices like redlining and discrimination, employment policies have led to the current reality of massive income and wealth gaps within this country. Those practices are a part of a system that have prevented families, particularly families of color, with women as the head of household, have prevented them from creating wealth in the same way white families have been able to. In order to help break this down, the median wealth for a white family is over $140,000. For a Latina family, it is over $7,000. And for a Black family, it is under $4,000. So to even ground this a little more, I'll share one of my family's examples. My auntie passed last year from COVID, a year ago last week. This week, my cousin, her only daughter, sent around a family text message where she's passing the bucket so we can get a headstone for my auntie. That is what happened when wealth is not created. The system is willing to uphold myths and false narratives, to push forward political agendas and help ourselves feel better about their privilege, because those people deserve their situation anyway. It is so much harder to hear these stories because it means that we are all complicit in the continuation of poverty. In spite of these realities and false narratives, I persisted. And I persisted because I run an organization where we have a radically resident-driven tagline. And so I take that responsibility to heart. And so I persisted because I have the honor of working in purpose. And when you understand that the work that you are doing is to answer to someone's dream, that's exactly what you do. You continue to persist. And that is exactly what all of you all are doing. You're working to help mothers get the support they need, recognizing that empowered moms can self-advocate for themselves. And that's a part of my work and my mission each and every day. So what did persistence get me, y'all? That was 2017. We're in 2021. We launched the Magnolia Mothers Trust. It's the guaranteed income project that provides $1,000 monthly for 12 months to Black mothers that live in federally subsidized affordable housing, named after a nod to our state flower of Mississippi, as well as my grandmother's favorite flower. We're building a movement where we are based on dignity and trust. Individuals know exactly what it is that they need for themselves and their families. So we just need to trust them and get out the way. We are currently in our third year of supporting households led by Black mothers. And this year we're supporting 100 moms. Last year we supported 110 moms. The year before that we supported 20 moms. And the money could not have come at a more crucial time. This money continues to serve as a lifeline as many of our mothers still are not working. There's inadequate childcare, and they are feeling the direct impact of the economic downturn as we continue to grapple with this pandemic that we are all so ready to be done with. So since I'm talking to academicians, I know I have to share some data. I know I have to get some impact because I know y'all gonna ask. So I'm gonna give you what we've learned in the last few years. Of our first year, the first women that we supported way back in 2018, of the 20 women in our first cohort, 19 of those individuals have moved out of affordable housing. They are in either market rate housing or they moved on to home ownership. Our moms indicated that the ability to pay their bills has increased from 27% to 83%. 100% of our moms indicated that they felt like a good parent for the first time because they could say yes to some of the things that their kids want, not just all the things that their kids need. Our moms were able to purchase new clothes and shoes for their kids, laptops, hotspots, PPE. 100% felt like they were prepared for school this year as well as last year. The Magnolia Mothers Trust is currently the longest running guaranteed income demonstration project in the United States since Nixon's administration of the negative income tax experiment that began in the late 60s. And it's the only one specifically targeting Black women, taking a gender and racial equity lens. This specific targeting is because we understand you cannot talk about economic liberation without having conversations about racism and sexism. When I tell y'all I'm glad I persisted, and also when I'm telling y'all I got that degree that was useless, y'all just don't know. But even though I persisted in helping the dream come to fruition, the Magnolia Mothers Trust is not my work. It is the solution that came from the community. It's not mine. I simply am a stopgap. These women told me what it is that they needed, not another program, simply cash, and I chose to listen. And this is sometimes where academia fails, not recognizing the collective wisdom that is found in community and choosing to focus only on scientific rigor and standards and instruction and not pushing back on the status quo. Centering the voices of those marginalized by our current system is integral to any conversation about equity and change. But first, we need to understand why the system is inequitable. While many people like to say the system is broken, the truth is the system was never meant to work well for anyone other than wealthy white men. And the system is working exactly how it was designed to work. And it's up to us to design a new one. And we all have the tools to do that. We are all in academia in some way or the other. The current slogan during these COVID times has been to build back better. But what if we actually did the hard work of building back better? Building a new system that works for all families, not just a chosen few. If we are designing new systems that work for all people, then all people, especially those whose voices and stories have historically been ignored, need to be a part of building that new system. The feedback loop that Springboard has established is only possible because we have invested in the relationships on the front end. This model shifts the power, the design of policies from the ivory tower to those who actually have the lived experiences with those policies that they're impacted with day to day. And it gives voice to those who have been ignored by our society and policies for too long, empowering a new narrator. I appreciate getting invited to events and Zoom panels and Zoom talks where I get to talk about the program and the amazing women that I get to work with. And I, love talking to reporters in those pieces. It's very fancy, and who doesn't like to be fancy in these COVID times, y'all? But more than anything, I like when the moms that we work with actually have an opportunity to tell their own stories. We have been doing significant work over the last year with Ms. Magazine and a piece that we have called Front and Center, where we really are working to change the narrative by changing the narrator around racial equity and cross motherhood by centering the moms that we work with and giving them the platform. And so many people get caught up in what is rather than what is possible and fail to lean into radical imagination. One of my favorite quotes is by Adrienne Rich, which states that, "But nothing less than the most radical imagination will carry us beyond this place, beyond the mere struggle for survival, to the lucid recognition of our possibilities, which will keep us impatient and unresigned to mere survival." I love that quote. And this is what I know for sure as it relates to the work that we're all doing. Radical imagination can be held by anyone. You don't have to run an organization or have tenure. We can all manifest possibilities. Everyone in the Zoom room has the ability to use their radical imagination and perform magic with the sphere of influence that you hold. Being excited about what is possible, not just resigned to survival, connecting the dots between academia and community, purpose, and activism. And how do we go about radical imagination? It's like, that is so wonky and that is so hard to do. It's really not. It's just easy. You just listen. You listen to the details behind the words. You listen for the actions behind what people are telling you. You build relationships and you show up. We all have the ability to really, really listen, to work with and have the privilege of serving, to work with those individuals that we have the privilege of serving alongside, listening with our full heart and not just our mind, which sometimes prevent us from living into the spaces of possibilities. Because, as I have said, we all fall victim to our ideologies and our stigmas. But if we listen with our heart, it allows for a new narrator to come forward. For me in my work, I know I'm leaning into radical imagination and I am dreaming bigger. Y'all, I have a whole lot of social capital that I have built up over the years, and I am unapologetic about that. And I am not using my social capital for the manifestation of more stuff for me and my family. I'm using that to really implement lessons that I've learned about innovating in the field and applying it to the millions of people in this country who are suffering. I am taking every opportunity I have to yell from the rooftops that it is time to rebuild our social contract into one that honors the inherent dignity and deservedness of all of us. I am using my radical imagination not to only envision, but work towards having a country where poverty does not exist. For you as researchers, teachers, mothers, it may be making a person's life better through your work in the next year, using your radical imagination to think about a new program or opportunity to think about research differently and an intersection between activism and scholarship, not sticking to the status quo of what we have been told has to be, but leaning into the magic of what can be. And that perhaps you take what you learned in doing so to share with your colleagues and come up with ways in which you can expand those positive results to more and more people. As Nelson Mandela said, it always seems impossible until it's done. I am confident that with the dedication, energy, and commitment we have here, and that we are all fostering in our communities, that we are going to get so much closer to getting it done and creating equity for mothers, all of us. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Every time I hear you speak, I just want to like go out and do something big, and just you're so inspirational and amazing. And I love being, I mean, I can't imagine actually being in a real room with you. I think the only conversations we've had, if it was some sort of something in between, and I hope one day that we could be in the real world together instead of just in virtual spaces. But until then, please, if you're joining us in the audience and you have questions, comments, anything else that you'd like to chime in with, please feel free to do that. But I will probably kick off the first question, and I don't know exactly where I want to start with it.
Here, urban Wi-Fi is acting wonky, which is why I've turned the screen off, but I'm here. So,
okay. Yeah, sure. So one of the questions that I had was, after working with so many mothers and doing your own mothering, and of course being an activist, in what ways does mothering inform your activism? And in what ways do you think your activism informs your mothering?
Oh my gosh, that's a really good question. I never separate them out, actually. And I don't think I separate them out because that's not how I was raised. And I never actually consider my work as activism. I just consider it creating the world that I think we all need. And so being a mother, I've always wanted to do this work. I've always wanted to work in community. And I think that being a mother has intensified that sense of urgency for me, like I'm no longer patient. I am radically impatient, so much so that I probably get on people's nerves, but I don't care because, I truly believe that everyone's child should have access to the same things that my kids have, and that it should not be about zip codes and education and deservedness. So I think my being a mother has sped up my sense of urgency, just because I'm no longer comfortable with the status quo. I feel like the status quo has enough friends, and we all really should stop trying to be friends with the status quo.
Thank you. What was it? I'm trying to keep track of two different things here. I am not, they keep saying that women are great at
Run the chat.
multitasking. I'm like, how did I
That's
not
a lot.
get that? Like, I am a terrible multitasker. I'm like squirrel, and then I'm looking at something else.
I love it, Katie. You're so funny.
So in terms of tensions then between activism and academia, obviously you were talking a little bit about your own experience as a student and kind of navigating those spaces when you might be biting at the bit to be doing more, and all of those things, like where, and some of this is actually building a little bit off of last year's conversation between Laura Zumdahl, who runs New Moms in Chicago, and then Brenda Reyes, who does, she leads Health Connect One. And so we were talking a little bit about, the way that academia and activism can sometimes not quite pitted against each other, but almost seem at odds in certain ways, and there's frictions there. And so I was wondering, not only how do you navigate those spaces, but what do you see as some of the challenges there?
Yeah, it's so
about it.
Yeah, it's so interesting you asked me that, because I actually see that all the time in our work now, specifically with our guaranteed income work, because we're like, we need to go faster, now, more money. And research is like, well, we really don't know everything that we need to know about guaranteed income. And I'm like, but we do, it works. Liberate the capital, give the people the money. And academia is like, no, we need more rigorous research. We need randomized controls and so it's those tensions that I see every day, like I say now with my work. In a way that I go around that, quite frankly, is I feel like we can do both, and we can get the data that we need and still support families now. And we can broaden our definition of rigor. To me, ethnographic research is just as rigorous as quantitative research. Listening to families and what they have to say and really getting that rich data is just as significant as a survey, and more so in a lot of instances. So I just think we have to give ourselves permission to do both, act now and collect the data, and do everything that we can do while we're acting to make sure that we are not causing harm. And as we were saying earlier, the word of the century is grace. Give ourselves grace that, we don't know everything, but we know so much more than what we knew 3 years ago. And we do know what not acting does. Like we have decades of data that show us what poverty looks like in this country, and how we are consistently failing people with our current policies and systems. So do both, and you can implement programs based on the best information that you have while you're also simultaneously collecting the data.
Are you trying to do a lot of that sort of data work with the stuff that you're doing and publishing?
Yeah, we have a extensive evaluation process, because for us, it was important. Our evaluation pieces were important when we first started, because we had to get a proof of concept. So like I said, when we started this work with 20 mothers, there was no other entities that were working with a solely Black female population, but then also no other entities working with a population as low income as ours. And so most folks were telling us, your population is too poor. And I was like, that's problematic that we can say a population is too poor to be supported, and that we are just okay with disregarding an entire swath of our population. And so we were very intentional about designing our research and our evaluation, because we knew that we needed to establish a model. And we also knew that if we did this well, that there would be others that came after us and they needed a proof of concept and a how to. And so I took that all very, very seriously and still do. So we have a research component. We're currently in the process now of going back and doing retro conversations with our moms from the first year to see where they are this year. We're doing research. We've already changed our research this year to encompass the CTC and the impact of guaranteed income coupled with child tax credit, and how we're seeing our moms be able to elevate their outcomes so much more quickly than they would have with just the guaranteed income in those pieces. So yeah.
Do you think that that's then changing the conversations that you're having with, say, funders or government people or stuff like that, because you now have that data with you? Or is the hegemonic systems of, racism and sexism and all those things still overriding the conversation?
I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that question because in order to answer that question, I don't know if we truly know what has been the reasons why. I think COVID has changed the equation of so many of the conversations that we're having and the elevated timeline. Had it not been for COVID, do I believe that there would be 100 various guaranteed income pilots in some iteration in this country? No. So I think it was a perfect storm, unfortunately, where there were a few of us already having these conversations about cash without restrictions. We had some early data. We were positioned to really be advocates for the work, and then COVID hit. But I don't know. And yeah, so I can't answer that question because COVID changed the entire landscape and accelerated so many conversations.
So we have one of the questions from Tammy, who says, what was the most surprising and insightful thing you learned through listening to residents that went against the status quo narratives?
Oh, hold on. I think the piece, I'm about to now know how to answer that question. I'm like, I just said that and I can't keep saying it because it's going to make me just seem ridiculous. But let me say, I don't know how to answer that question. And I'm going to say, I don't know how to answer that question because most of what I hear from residents usually goes against the status quo narrative. The narrative of the mainstream community is so wrong when it comes to poverty that most of what I hear on a regular basis, I'm like, oh, well, if people only knew that, so yeah, most of it's wrong, what we believe, our ideologies, our belief systems, what we believe works, how we go about judging people, very little of it is accurate, quite frankly, which is so frustrating because I'm like, if we just listened and trusted and valued and took ourselves out of the solution or the equation for what we feel would get the solution, we could actually really eradicate poverty. But we will not get out of our own way because we believe we know what's right. I just had a conversation last week with somebody who was like, why aren't you doing a budgeting class? I'm like, nobody asked for that. And they were like, oh, but people need budgeting and XYZ. And I was like, it is October. Well, it's not October yet, but I was like, it is October. And all the mamas that I work with already got all their Christmas gifts out of layaway. That's budgeting. That's budgeting.
Yeah. And I was thinking that too, of that sort of idea of even something that, so I'm thinking when you said, well, this one mom was saying that it allowed me to feel like I'm being a good mom because I'm able to not even just provide the necessities, but provide some of the wants. And so the way that then gets shifted in public narrative of,
no, that's exactly right.
I think, oh, how dare she buy,
yeah.
And
I think that's the piece of it. And I think, so I do think that is what we have learned that has been the most heartbreaking to me out of all of this, is because I see like the women that we work with, I think they are some of the most amazing moms that I know. I see them pulling it together on shoestring budgets with grace and dignity and laughter. They are so funny. So much laughter and joy when they are constantly met with these little foxes that are just designed to make their lives virtually impossible to navigate. And so when we heard that data our first year, and then the second year, it was the same narrative, it just began to be really heartbreaking because I'm like, they don't even see themselves the way that we see them or the way that I see them. That the piece to me that's so heartbreaking is that they have accepted the mainstream narrative as their narrative, which is why we started our work this year we started a program called the Storytelling Lab, where we are really giving moms the power of understanding their story and giving them the skills and tools to tell their story. Because I was like, you know what? They have assumed this narrative that's not theirs. And we are allowing their light to be snuffed out, and that's not okay, because they need to see themselves that the way that they are. That's activism, that's advocacy. We can't let their narrative and their talking points be what Fox News is or whoever's talking points are about their life. Perfect example of this, I was talking to one of our moms, a mom named Danielle, earlier this year. And she was just going on and on and on about how she needed to learn how to manage her money better. And I was like, well, why do you feel like you need to manage your money better? And she was like, because at the end of the month, I never have enough money. And I was like, well, do you have enough money at the beginning of the month? If she works as a teacher or a Head Start teacher. And I was like, well, Danielle, how much do you make an hour? And she's like, I make $10.10 an hour. And I was like, Danielle, is that enough money? She's like, well, it has to be enough money. Danielle, why does it have to be enough money? Because that's what they pay me. And I was like, no, sweetheart, that is not enough money. Data shows that you need at least $15 an hour just to have baseline functioning, not even thriving. And I was like, so it's not that you are doing anything wrong. You are set up for failure before you even get started every month. And it was the first time that she had ever thought about that. Like, oh, I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't have enough to begin with. So it's those kind of pieces. So I think, to answer the question, I do know the answer. To answer the question, I think the most surprising part of all of this has been how pervasive the narratives are, and how how pervasive the narratives are, and how much harm that they are doing, not just in keeping the status quo of our systems, but how much harm they're doing in actually allowing people to see themselves and how they're impacting people's self-esteem.
So Elizabeth just chimed in with that and says, can you speak a bit more about the Storytelling Lab project? My mind is racing, looking for concrete strategies for bridging the silence between public/academic discourse and unheard stories.
Yeah, so we started this project earlier this year, late last year, maybe. And it's it's sort of like a speakers bureau for our moms. We have opportunities often, because of some of the popularity that we've had with the work, to talk about the work to various outlets. And I became really intentional last year that, okay, I don't always have to be the one talking about this. This isn't my work. When we started, I had to talk about it because I had to raise the money and get the word out there. But at some point it becomes extractive, and I'm like, we've got to begin to turn this over to the women whose work it is. And you can't have a movement unless the people who are being impacted are centered in that movement. So we have created opportunities for our moms to become trained in telling their stories, to become trained in advocacy and political education and awareness. Our moms write their own op-eds. We have an entire, like I said when I was doing my talk, we have an entire partnership with Ms. Magazine, where those op-eds are published twice monthly. Do that vehicle, and it is a full circle. It's op-eds, it's interviews, it's podcasts. Whenever we can give our moms an opportunity to share, we allow them to, but we also provide them with the support and training. So many people just feel like you can throw people out there. No one just threw me out there to talk. When Katie read my bio, y'all, I had all of the fellowships and training. So we have to give people those same opportunities as well, so that when they do have an opportunity, that they are positioned. So yeah.
So I know we have just a few more minutes, so if there's some closing question from folks, please put those in there. But we tend to, at least through many of our talks, and I think I've actually pitched this one at you before, is when we talk about maternal action, what do you think the folks in this room could do to affect change, whether it's, for themselves in their communities or in the broader world?
Yeah, I think the folks in this room can affect change. Like I said in the talk, radical imagination. We are in a very pivotal point in our history where we have the ability to change a lot of systems really radically fast. And my concern is that as we are having pandemic fatigue and ready to move on with our lives, that we are going to let go of some of that imagination and just go back to the way things were. And the reality is that the way things were not working for the majority of us. And so how do we hold on to that same fire that we had this time last year when we were like, all right, we can affect change. We can do these pieces. So I think that's it. Just whatever radical imagination means for you to lean into that and figure out what that is and use your social capital. If you are on a Zoom on a Sunday afternoon, you have social capital, whether or not you recognize it. So use your social capital in order to affect change. And don't let people tell you you can't do something because they're usually wrong and jealous. And you say, watch me.
I think I was part of several talks that had pretty much that same idea of that whole better just to do and ask forgiveness later.
And do it. And it's not even about asking permission. This is like, you know what? I don't know. If you are truly operating in a space where you know that you are operating in your power and in your purpose and being led by something greater than yourself, you just do it. It's not even about asking for forgiveness. It's like, I'm gonna do it, and I'm not going to be afraid of cancel culture or whatever that. So when we started this, so many folks are like, you are going to lose your job. And I told my husband, I was like, you know what? I may lose my job if this doesn't work. I was like, I don't know, because it was so many people telling me what we could not do. And I was like, I am really afraid that if this goes left, my board could, and I was so vocal with it. I was like, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna go big. We're just not gonna hide that we're giving this money away. We're going to go big, and we are going to name that we are giving money to poor Black mothers. And so many folks are like, oh, maybe you just want to give the money and not say who you're giving the money to. And I'm like, no, 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 no. That doesn't make any sense. We have got to call out the systems and the why behind it. And so I was like, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna go big. And if it doesn't work, then I go home and it'll be okay. And thankfully, it has been okay. But I say all that to say, I say all that to say that so many times, us as women and mothers, particularly, when we have these positions, we get so into our own fear of what could happen that we let the fear become this all-consuming piece that prevents the magic from happening. And in some instances, yes, in some instances, there may be some pieces or something that you're proposing where it may not go well and you may lose your job or you may lose a position. But in a lot of instances, that's not the case. We have built up these narratives that we are telling ourselves about what could happen, and that prevents us from leaning into radical imagination and possibilities.
Aisha, I absolutely, Mari, I love how your work refuses the disposability of Black life on so many levels and that you are unapologetic about it, was one of the comments. But yes, that and I think I'm speaking for everybody here, your passion, your vigor, your imagination, your dedication, your work ethic, your brilliance, your inspiration is all infectious and wonderful. And I'm so glad that you were able to share part of your Sunday with us today. I think everybody's probably going to be giving you a virtual. I mean, it's just not the same in a virtual space, but we're so appreciative.
Enjoy the rest of your conference. And again, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
If you need me, Katie knows how to find me. So thank you so much.
Thanks again.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, so am I sharing my screen? Tammy, I can see you. You can see my screen, right? Okay. So unfortunately, we have to go back to less fun stuff and less, not that that's fun because it's such serious topics, but Aisha just brings such joy to a room.